Question number 6, Ron Mark.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Civil Defence, and might I take the opportunity to thank him for the opportunity to tour there today, myself and Clayton Mitchell MP. Thank you very much. Question to the Minister of Civil Defence, can he update the House on the situation in the quake-affected areas?
The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Well, Mr Speaker, it would take a very long time for me to update the House on all matters. As the member would have seen when he was in Kaikoura today, there's a lot of happening on the ground, a lot of activity on the ground, and that is true from one end of the Marlborough electorate to the other, as well as, in fact, here in Wellington. So what I would suggest is, if it's not being disrespectful to the member, that keeps an eye on those civil defence regular updates that are posted on the website.
Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, has he had a report back from the Minister of Primary Production, who is now touring small towns in rural Kaikoura, on the outskirts of Kaikoura, and that have been affected by the earthquake? And if he is, can he tell us and update the House as to how those families in those isolated areas are faring?
The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, as the member knows, the Honourable Nathan Guy was on the same flight as him this morning. And at the conclusion of his investigations of the circumstances that the fishing industry up and down the Canterbury coast now finds itself in, he has taken to the skies to get into some of those more remote areas, and I would expect to be updated by him, as would a number of other ministers, later in the evening. When that comes through, we'll of course want to take action for any immediate needs that may have been discovered. But our assessment is that, given the status of the communications in the whole of the province, we would have known by now if there were any particularly dire circumstances that needed addressing. So it will be the ongoing needs, I suspect, of the farming community, tipped over fences, power lines. We've seen some of the slips which have isolated stock, etc. And there'll also, of course, be, because there's so many slips, any number of shingle roads that also have some difficulties. So there will emerge quite a picture of what needs to be done to assist people in that regard. Today, of course, the Minister of Economic Development and the Minister of Social Development have announced their business support package, and that, of course, is a start under what will be a watching brief from the government.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, further to that answer, will he, after seeing widespread damage to small businesses and farms, raise in Cabinet the need to amend the Income Tax Act 2007 to classify earthquake remediation and strengthening as repairs and maintenance?
The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, I wouldn't be specific about what the government might do in that regard. He will, of course, remember that in Christchurch some of the obligations that people had by a particular date were amended or suspended. All of that is being looked into. The one thing that is essential in all of these circumstances is to encourage people to continue with their activity as much as they possibly can, recognising the difficulty of the circumstances that they find themselves in and being there to support them through those difficulties.
Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, what can he and the Minister of Police do to assist frontline police officers in Kaikoura right now who are frustrated by people in Kaikoura who are not locals and not emergency workers, but who have decided to stay on, taking advantage of the generosity of the locals and the marae, spending their nights drinking and partying?
The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, firstly, can I acknowledge the superb work of the New Zealand Police and the Defence Force personnel who are there alongside the civil defence people who are putting in many, many hours to try and make things better. And of course those good people at the marae who've opened up to create the welfare centre. Without them, the whole response would have looked pretty shallow. Mr Speaker, you always unfortunately get the opportunists in these circumstances. We had some of that in Christchurch. My advice to people who are visiting and have had an opportunity to get on with their travels would be to get on with their travels. But on the other hand, if they want to deposit the minimal funds that they have in Kaikoura, we're also grateful for that. But at the end of this week, then I think some of the need for the very generous hospitality that's been extended will have diminished, and that may see them pack up sticks and go.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Ron Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, would he look into, with the Minister of Police, the reports that police officers caught people looting the stranded train and ensure that the officers and the people of Kaikoura responsible for those apprehensions are congratulated?
Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I have to say at this point I haven't had a report to that effect, but if that is the case and the police have apprehended those people, we would expect the full force of the law to come down on them. That is simply burglary, and in the circumstances it's at the upper end of the scale, and we would expect the courts to reflect that in any proved case when it comes to sentencing.